Good evening and welcome to Chasing the Facts. Today is December 7th, 2021. It is the 80th anniversary of the bombing of Pearl Harbor. As President Roosevelt said, a dastardly deed, which it was. And I make reference to it today because I think it's important for us as Americans to remember and learn from our history. My family actually had two very close friends who lost their lives at Pearl Harbor. My father was in the United States Navy during World War II. He was 34 years old when they dropped that bomb, and he was exempt. He had a double deferment. He went and he signed up anyway, and he joined the Navy and was in for the duration. So today, on the 80th anniversary of the bombing of Pearl Harbor, I want us to stop and think and remember and give thanks for all the veterans who gave their lives and those among us who are veterans today. Let's stop and remember the sacrifices that they have made. Thank you very much. And with that, I would like to introduce tonight's guest, who is, I'm a stickler for titles, and sometimes I get them wrong, so I'm going to put my glasses on and make sure I get this right. We have with us this evening Lisa Marrone, who is the Director of Business Development. How's that?
Correct.
Oh,
yes.
Good. For the town. And Lisa's been with the town for about 3 years, and it's an interesting story that she has to tell. So I'm going to let her introduce herself, a little bit of a bio and experience, and then we'll get into the questions for this evening. So I'll turn it over to you, Lisa.
Okay, great. Thank you for inviting me back on Chasing the Facts.
Very welcome.
I really appreciate the extra support to help me get my message out to the community and the work that I've been doing. A bit of my bio: I am a graduate of Bentley University in 2000, and I went on to get my master's degree from Fitchburg State University in 2016. During that time, I also did 12 years at the City of Leominster Economic Development, and prior to that, I worked at MIT Lincoln Lab as a business manager for about another 12 years to that. And I was hired here January 3rd, 2018, so I'm about to finish my third year
It doesn't seem possible.
Yeah,
that you've been here that long.
It's been quite a ride, I'll tell you that one. So I feel very fortunate to be in this position. I am very grateful to be working for the town of Chelmsford. I love the work that I do, and I really value the opportunity to fulfill a new role, a newly established role. It's the first time I've been in this situation, filling a created position to accomplish some large assignments and some heavy tasks, but I've been really trying to push hard and making some progress that we'll share and talk about. But I do really look forward to coming to work every day and working hard and giving it my best. And we've tried some new things. Not everything works, but COVID makes you work more creatively and work around and figure things out. There's been a lot of challenges along the way, but I still really look forward to the daily work that I do.
Well, I think that's good, and the fact that you, after 3 years and all of the challenges that you've faced during those 3 years, the fact that you still have a very high level of enthusiasm is very commendable, number one, but it's also, I think, crucial to your continued successful job performance. I can't imagine a more difficult time than actually what we've been through for the last couple of years anyway. And really, when you started, as I recall, not everybody was on board with the concept of a business development director for Chelmsford. And I think, so you may not have been aware of that at the time you were hired. Maybe you were.
A little bit.
But that fact and the fact that you were able to work through that, I mean, it was almost as if you had to work a little harder to prove yourself to maybe some folks who were a little bit skeptical of what that whole concept was about. But I think whoever the skeptics were, I think you've largely converted them, which is great, okay, because I haven't heard anything but positive things about what you've been doing.
Thank
So
you for that.
when you were hired, how much direction was given to you? I mean, were you given a roadmap, or were you just given some general objectives and told, okay, you're a professional, we expect you to work through this? And can you describe a little bit about how that evolved?
Yeah, sure. So, upon hiring, right immediate off the bat, I really needed to build a network. I really needed to build those relationships and partnerships to support business development in the town of Chelmsford. So from the get-go, attending all types of networking events, Chamber of Commerce, Middlesex 3 Coalition, really trying to get right in with the area regional agencies and support spaces. So I traveled a little bit, by car, not like really far and wide, but did a lot of attending out of town with larger mega mixers, they call them, things like that. And in the same fold, spent a lot of time door knocking. I literally visited at least 300, 400 businesses. A lot of my network I've met in person, not just picking up business cards along the way, such that when I'm emailing or connecting or calling, I'm getting responses from the businesses. I'm not just trying to buy a contact list for the sake of pushing out emails. So I'm a people person. I like meeting people. So that was one of the, do what you love type of aspects of the job right from the get-go. But one of the more daunting tasks was the level of empty space we had on Route 129, the multi-story office buildings. During my time in Leominster, I filled up all that empty space, but it's 90% industrial manufacturing space. So coming into Chelmsford, trying to fill up empty space is a whole different approach and a whole different set of resources to do that. And looking at the buildings and what was there, why they left, what do we want to recruit back, things like that, was a bit a bit overwhelming at times. And that's where the strengthening of partnerships began, that the town alone can't do this type of work, being a neutral party per se, trying to attract businesses to private properties. So we do that through the partnerships that build the resources, and certainly the college institutions for workforce development, and layering in those aspects of why a business wants to locate in Chelmsford. Why would they want to come here? What is the appeal? What are other communities doing that Chelmsford could do differently? We're not necessarily looking to compete against Burlington. We can't be Burlington. We can't be Lexington. We have to be Chelmsford, and we have to learn how to do our own way of business friendly, and what do we want to recruit into our empty spaces. So that was a little bit of a different programming approach in learning about that in the first year.
How did your experience in Leominster help you in that regard? I mean, I understand the communities are totally different from a demographic standpoint.
Yeah.
In terms of population, also in terms of business mix. The perception that I have of Leominster is that it's more industrially oriented than small business commercial, which is really at least half of what we have in Chelmsford in terms of the commercial activity. So, obviously you had that experience, but it wasn't directly comparable. So that was probably even more of a hurdle, I would say, to try to overcome maybe some of the perceptions or the comfort things that you had built into your background. Your knowledge base had to change a little bit, I would think.
Certainly, absolutely. Yeah. Some of that work is through the property owners. and the brokers and the realtors, trying to connect with them. Who's coming to look at the space? How can we influence some deals to, to happen? And trying to connect with the property owners is quite different than walking into a business and talking with the proprietors or the owners. So, and another part of the challenge was that prior to my role, there wasn't specific outreach to the businesses, to the business property. There was no outspoken or person out in the community going door to door, meeting and learning and understanding what are your challenges, how can we help, what can we do differently. Certainly we knew that zoning is a major factor, and we had some modernized zoning, but as you know, over the past 3 years, we've made some zoning changes, the overlay districts, the 129 drive-through. Zoning is extremely important, and you see some projects that can't go into other communities because their zoning is just not amenable to the market demands that are happening. So,
For example, Westford does not allow drive-through.
Right.
And whenever I drive through Westford and I go by the McDonald's, I just kind of shake my head and I say, what?
Yeah.
And if they're concerned about traffic, that's such a heavily trafficked area, I just don't see that would be a major impact. But again, I'm not a planning and development expert, so what do I know? But I mean, sometimes you scratch your head. And I know that was a very contentious discussion at town meeting when they put in the zoning change to allow for that. But I think, again, I think what you just said is very apropos. If you want to attract business, if you want reasonable development, consistent with whatever the objectives of your economic program are for your town, you have to be reasonable, okay? And reasonable means market responsive. I mean, if the market is demanding something, you have to at least take that into consideration and put that into your development thinking. Am I that far off?
Because what's happening is, so the buildings, when I was hired, we had over 1 million. It was actually 1.5 million square feet of existing empty square footage.
I'm going to say that again, folks. 1.5 million of existing commercial industrial space in the town of Chelmsford that was empty, which that situation tends to depress the property values.
Yes. And a lot of very large empty parking lots. It just does not present well, and then the landscaping starts to go, and things just look very uninviting.
It's amazing how quickly the weeds grow up through the asphalt.
10-foot weeds are not an exaggeration,
no.
And then, cracked parking lots and things just very unkept, and then it becomes a really tough sell of how to excite and invite. And one of the things I had done was a contractor tour. I had brought some contractors through some empty buildings so they could see what was available, because it seems that during the time of COVID, because of all of the real estate adjustments and shifts, the contractors and the larger developers started to try to, it looked like they were taking on a role of site finders, because they knew how quickly buildings could either be retrofitted or renovated or adapted. They knew the expense of it, the timeline, and the chase on building materials. So it really kind of became a transition to working with developers to come look at these buildings and help understand, what would work great here. But that was difficult in some regards, because not all of those property owners wanted people marching through their buildings to find out there's no cafeteria. That's very difficult to adjust.
Let's talk about that for a second. What you just said, there's no cafeteria, that's a problem. So in your view, over the last, I'm going to say 15 years, based on my private sector work experience, the model has changed. I mean, the old rule of you get up, you get in your car and you drive 10, 15, 20 miles a day and go to a bricks and mortar building and you put in your 8, 9, 10, some of us it was longer, hours, and then come home, that's changed. Okay, so when we have that dynamic in place and we have 1.5 million square foot of empty space, it makes it
Sleepless nights.
Easier or harder to fill that space?
A lot
I mean,
of
fill
like,
in the blank.
how
right?
am I going to do this?
Exactly.
How am I going to do this?
You know, so you're fighting a shift
Yeah.
in the way we work,
Yes.
and with that as an opening, talk a little bit about having to overcome that situation, perhaps by redesigning your workspace. And I'll use the word amenity because everyone loves that word. What does that mean in your context?
So amenity, everyone thinks of amenity as food, but in bigger terms, it's fitness, it's wellness, it's convenience. It can be food, but it can be a walking path. It can be childcare. It really is however way. And I think amenity came about by keeping your workforce happy.
Right.
Right? That's the real goal. Businesses are based on their workforce.
So the smart business people say, if I want folks to come to the office,
I better have a child care service or
better make it easy
some
for them to
flex
come to the
hours,
office, right?
or maybe
Right.
they want to exercise during lunch so they feel better, they manage everything better, they balance their life better, things like that.
And my experience is, in having managed employees, that if you do those kinds of things within reason, you actually get a more productive workforce and people who are less likely to miss days of work even.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So just a very quick story. When my older daughter moved away many, many years ago and got her first job in Washington, D.C., she worked for a very small company. And within about 3 or 4 months, her mother and I decided we were going to now go down and check up and see what was going on. So we visited her at her workplace. First thing, we walked through the door, and there are tables in the corridors loaded with all kinds of food. And I thought, oh, they're having a celebration or something like that. So get into Jennifer's office, and I said, what's with the food? Oh, she says, he feeds everybody every day. She said, this happens every day. She said, you can come in here, and this was 15 years ago. She said, you can come in here and have lunch, breakfast, whatever you want. And I said, of course Jennifer didn't think too much about it because she really didn't have, that was her first real corporate job, And I got back to the hotel and I said to my wife, boy, I'll tell you, I said, this fella's pretty smart guy. Pretty smart guy, I mean, there's no incentive to leave the office, and he probably gets 2 or 3 hours more productivity out of his employees every day by doing this.
Yeah, and loyalty
and
too,
loyalty, and they're happy,
Yeah,
and so that's just a quick little story to illustrate the point that you're
Same
trying to make.
concept with other things, other amenities. So when 129 has all this empty space, what's the appeal? And how are we going to do this? So,
exactly.
So that's how we started initially with the Business Amenity Incentive Grant. And that brought about some really interesting projects. We had 7 or 8 food-based interest to work with those buildings and put something in, and the property owners started to respond, and we were working towards that. And we had a finalized list of how to use those funds from the earmark to help incentivize change in the corridor, and then COVID arrived. So that really unraveled everything. It really set back an awful lot of progress in bringing in amenities.
Talk about how you had to shift gears because of COVID.
So the earmark that came to us had a clock ticking on it, and that money is not just open-ended. So we really became quite aggressive in talking with Press Cafe, and we thought that while we have this opportunity here, we really have to make this happen to turn this idea around that there's no amenities out here, and what better to do that with than Press Cafe. So we offered them an incentive to locate, and then we started negotiating in that property there, and so they were able to, the property owner.
This is on 129.
129, right. 330 Billrica Road. The RMR Group owns that building, and they started connecting with Prest Cafe, and the town was talking with Prest. So we were offering them an incentive to locate in the corridor. So Prest really stepped it up and tried to secure a location, and they signed a lease with 330 Billrica Road. And in that same measure, a drive-through was discussed. And then my coworker, Evan Belansky, was able to use that drive-through overlay feature with some really smart limitations so that we're not overrun with drive-throughs and it becomes like a, you know, a commercial strip. So there's only 3 drive-throughs allowed, and there's special conditions to that permit. And so Press Cafe was able to add that service of a drive-through feature to their project on the corridor. And I think the excitement is not necessarily just that convenience factor. There'll be outdoor dining, there'll be indoor dining, there'll be a drive-through, but really trying to learn from what happens in other communities of Press Cafe, where you really need that added customer flow for the interest and demand of Press Cafe. So I think the drive-through is going to be really a smart move on all parts to do that. It's under construction now, as you see, and it looks pretty involved.
Yes, it does.
And that's why, you know, looking back, it just looks like we're pushing papers around. It's really interesting to put a drive-through up to an office building. Not sure how many other places have managed to do that, but I think that's another way that Chelmsford can make themselves appealing, aside from trying to, you know, go to the Burlington, Bedford, Billrica locations. You know, we have to do our things a bit differently, but do it smart. And I think that only allowing 3, because we have still more empty space to fill, gives enough of that interest to locate in the 129 if you're a business amenity or if you're an employer looking to, you know, keep your workforce local and satisfied with their workplace. So.
It's amazing, though, because of the impact of COVID. I mean, I've worked, I should have said this at the beginning of the show, I also happen to be on the Economic Development Commission, so I've worked with Lisa on a few things and been able to observe your work ethic and your approach, and have been very, very impressed just by your general approach to the job and the amount of effort that you put in, especially considering your long commute.
Well, when you feel supported,
that's tough.
You know, I think
tough.
it is like when you feel supported when you get to work, and some of this is you have to try it to see if it's going to work.
Right,
you
exactly.
know, and we'll talk about some of that I did, but to feel supported in those, at least, you know, make the first move and try this and see if it works. If it doesn't, go in a different direction. But part of the EDC, when I arrived, the EDC, the Economic Development Commission, was already on their way to setting a branding and an identity. And that's all new because you're a municipality helping to establish a designation for that area. It's really unique on how to do that. So fast forward 2 or 3 years, we've filled up more than half of our empty spaces full. We're really getting down to it now, and so that's working. That was a good measure.
And let's consider
that
20 months of that is with the pandemic conditions prevailing. So Lisa has, through her efforts and those of others, I mean, obviously it's not just you, but you're the spearhead. We've gone from about 1.5 million of empty square footage in town down to about half that. So I'd say that's a pretty significant accomplishment under some very, very difficult economic and other external conditions over which you have absolutely no control.
And I want to point out the fact, and even today I learned as well, that there are a lot of investors and a lot of influential people that are watching and monitoring how the town is doing, how we're operating, how business friendly are we, how are the approvals going, how long does this take, how is it received, things like that. And I think that's really important because even now there are some really affluent people and wealthy people looking to invest money into Chelmsford. There are still more buildings that are available and more for sale, and there are people that want to purchase more buildings, and we've learned of some of that today, and there's some great things on the horizon for 2022 that we're talking about that we can't really necessarily put out in the public just yet.
Right.
But I am super motivated about what's coming next in the next year. We've survived the pandemic. It's not really exactly over yet, but of all the things we've had to overcome, we're still doing good things, and we're filling up space, and we have some other pretty impressive things coming in the next year. But I think that's because there's a lot of people observing what's happening. I think that's a factor in all of that.
And that's very important. And the feedback that you're getting from these folks, what is your perception concerning their perception of where Chelmsford fits versus what's being done by other communities? In other words, what's our rank, for lack of a better way of saying it?
With no exaggeration, they just say, we're doing all the right things. They tell me, when I say they, I'm meaning the developers, the brokers, the realtors, the people showing the buildings, the people owning the buildings, and we're in constant contact. What else can we work on? How else can we partner? And really, it's all things are really, right now, it's the sewer moratorium.
Right.
Is really not necessarily setting us back, but as far as filling up office buildings, that's one of the concerns.
Although I would say, and somebody's going to correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the fact that those buildings have existed for a long period of time, and we've had the sewer now for 30-plus years, I would think that for those existing footprints, the sewer capacity is already...
There's allotments, yep.
Is already pretty much taken care of.
Yeah.
When you have if we have a large building project, then that's going to be an issue.
Right.
And we have the situation with the housing development on North Campus, where they're having to build a sewer treatment plant because of that. So yeah, that could be a problem. But,
it is.
Yeah.
But the empty buildings have an allotment of capacity.
Yes, right.
So the discussion is, if you want to use this for something other than office, then we need to have a conversation of what that means.
That makes sense.
What that means, some additional on-site, or what does that look like? So, but when you look at what we're getting down to, we're in discussions with a large project on 300 Billerica Road, and then 270 Billerica Road's up for sale. So I think we're about to go through some more changes, some more positive momentum forward.
Good.
And of the empty space, a lot of it is upfront and visual, which kind of drags down the whole, the crossroads of Route 129 is 600 acres. It's very large.
Yes.
But all the empty space is in all these highly visible buildings that sets the tone for the rest of it. But we have some very important businesses out there. And prior to the pandemic, we had almost 8,000 people coming to work on the 129 Crossroads area.
Wow.
So pretty vibrant.
I wasn't aware of that.
Very
number.
vibrant. You think about Zoll Medical, Brooks Automation, Teleflex. I mean, we have some very large employers that provide livelihoods for a lot of people that it's important. Chelmsford's location is a real positive factor for the accessibility, not on public transit, exit right off for 129 to get into the area, things like that. Abundant parking, those are important factors when you're looking for space and housing.
Well, I mean,
Schools,
I think that mentality is consistent with, why people come here for residential purposes. I mean, because it's perceived as a good location to live. Part of that is access to things.
Lifestyle, reward, and balance.
The same thing applies to businesses when they locate.
They're looking for transportation, housing, accessibility. Workforce training, the educational institutions all around that keep that pipeline going.
I hate to tell you, but we're out of time, and so we have to say goodbye.
All right.
But Lisa,
You'll have me back again,
I
though,
will
right?
absolutely have you
Okay.
back, and soon. So thank you very
Yes.
much for joining us,
Always a
and
pleasure.
we'll talk to you again soon.